This story takes place in a quiet, forgotten corner of the city, where an old restaurant stands untouched by time. Once a place of prestige, it now lingers in eerie silence, its walls whispering the story of glory long past. A renowned chef sat alone in the dim light of an empty restaurant kitchen. Before her lay an old worn book. The book before her, like a coiled serpent, family recipe book, bound in aged leather and embossed with initials long forgotten, had always been a talisman of success. She'd followed its guidance to create dishes that elevated her to stardom. But the final chapter, ominously titled The Devouring Feast, had always been taboo. The edges of those pages were scorched, as though someone had tried to burn them, but lacked the resolve to finish. It all started with a single bad review. A minor critique, harsh but not fatal. Yet in the world of fine dining, perception was everything. The chef's career was crumbling. Her creations have lost their spark, becoming as soulless as the over-polished interior of her restaurant. Reservations had dwindled. Investors were pulling out. Desperation clawed at her, drowning out years of warnings from an elder relative. Never open that chapter. The cost is too great. With trembling hands, she turned the page. The recipes in the Devouring Feast were unlike anything she'd ever encountered. Instructions were cryptic and ritualistic, requiring rare and unsettling ingredients. She sourced what she could from usual suppliers, but some items were impossible to find. Then, as though summoned by desperation, a parcel arrived at the doorstep. Inside were blackened herbs that exuded a pungent, almost decayed aroma, and a sealed package of dark, marbled meat that seemed to pulse faintly under her touch. No return address, no explanation. She should have been terrified, but curiosity and desperation overpowered caution. "One dish," she whispered. "Just one dish to save everything." Preparations were extremely difficult, that it must be done in complete silence. No whispers, no clatter of utensils, no hum of machines. She worked in eerie stillness, her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. As she worked on searing the meat and grounding the herb, an unnatural energy seemed to fill the air, prickling her skin and making shadows in the kitchen dance. When the dish was complete, she tasted a single bite. Flavors burst across her tongue, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Sweet, salty, bitter and umami, intertwined in perfect harmony, leaving her euphoric and light-headed. She knew then that this dish could save the restaurant, perhaps even her soul. The exclusive tasting event was held the following weekend. Critics, celebrities, and wealthy patrons filled the dining room, their chatter a symphony of anticipation. The chef unveiled her masterpiece with dramatic flair. Diners took their first bites, and the room fell silent. Then came the gasps of delight, the murmurs of astonishment. Some wept openly, overcome by the flavors. The chef watched with triumphant smile on her face. But as the evening wore on, a strange tension filled the air. Guests began to eat more rapidly, shoveling the food into their mouths as though possessed. One man's hand shook as he reached for his fork, his eyes wide with both terror and hunger. A woman sobbed uncontrollably, whispering, "It's everything I've ever wanted, but it's taking something from me." The chef approached her sous chef, who was pale and sweating. "Something's wrong," the sous chef said, his voice quivering. Panic rose in the chef's chest. She rushed to the dining room just as a guest collapsed to the floor, convulsing. Another patron's skin seemed to sag, as though years had been stripped from them in an instant. Their eyes were sunken, their faces hollow. The air grew thick with an oppressive weight, and the chef heard it then, a low hum emanating from the kitchen. She turned to see the shadows in the corners of the room shift and writhe into a monstrous form. She remembered an old tale in her family of an ancient parasitic entity that fed on human vitality. It used food as its conduit, enticing victims with flavors that awakened their deepest desires. The more they consumed, the more it devoured. Memories, emotions, even their very souls. And now the chef had unleashed it. The presence grew stronger with every bite taken. The chef fled to the kitchen, desperate to find a way to stop it. The recipe book lay open on the counter, the pages fluttering as though caught in an invisible wind. Her eyes fell on the final recipe. The instructions were chillingly clear. Prepare a banquet so wicked that it would satisfy the entity completely, but at the cost of every soul who partook. A terrible choice loomed before her. If she completed the feast, she could contain the entity and save herself. But it would mean sacrificing her guests. If she destroyed the book, she might banish the entity, but it would come at a cost she couldn't foresee. As the shadows closed in around her, whispering promises of eternal glory and success, the chef realized that the entity wasn't just feeding on her guests, it was feeding on her. Would she succumb to the whispers, or find a way to destroy the entity before it consumed everything she loved? Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed this eerie tale, don't forget to leave a like, and if you crave more chilling narratives, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Until next time.